Hello and welcome to the NBA and NASCAR Power Half Hour. I'm your host, James McDaniels, and we have got another great show on tap for you guys today. We got a lot of things to talk about. The NBA, it's coming down to the wire in the Western Conference. We have the Eastern Conference that's been decided. So we'll talk all about the upcoming NBA action, the NBA playoffs today. NASCAR, they had a huge race over at Martinsville, 500 laps at the paperclip. We'll talk all about that and what history was made today. And we'll also discuss on the show about March Madness, the Final Four. Wichita State, that went against Louisville, and Syracuse, which took on Michigan. And we'll explain the stats, and we'll rev you up for tomorrow's big game for the national championship in men's college basketball. So, to start off, let's go on to the NBA. And like I promised you all last week, I've got one of our show's biggest guests and runners, Robert Dieters, with me on the line. And I'm going to ask him a few questions about the NBA, where things stand now with only a few games to go until playoff time. So, Robert, first we've got here in the Eastern Conference, all 8 teams in the Eastern Conference have been decided on who's going to be playing in the Eastern playoffs leading up to the NBA Finals. You got to probably look at New York. They've won 12 straight. What do you think is the secret to New York in that win streak, and how is that going to help them going into the NBA playoffs?
The playoffs, they're looking good. I mean, today they beat OKC. I thought that was one of their best games they've had in a long time. I thought that was probably one of the most impressive ones they have had. Especially, I like Carl Anthony doing good right now, as well as Jason Kidd, Raymond Felton. I think they're all doing good. And, the team just needs to keep on going, keep the busy, keep on the news we're going right now, just keep the fire going. I think they'll do pretty well. I mean, the playoffs right now, it's looking like for them as they're going to be playing Boston. They're playing Boston, and, Boston I just haven't really liked. I just don't think they're going to do very well in the playoffs. So today, but this team isn't going to win very well. They already got that one, and Cameron today is one of the guys on the national board being on Boston. So I'm going to do very good. But looking at it, I think the Clippers is going to look pretty tough.
All right, so now that you have New York, and they're obviously becoming more and more of a favorite in the East. Of course, you got Miami, who's really just knocking everybody down in the East. But now you go out to the West, and the West is a very different story. Instead of all 8 teams being secure, there's only 5 teams right now that are secured in the Western playoffs. You still got Golden State, Houston, Utah that haven't clinched their spots yet, and then you have the Lakers and the Mavericks that are out of the playoffs currently, and they're only separated by a few games each with only a few games left to go. How do you see the West playing out, and who do you think is going to clinch those final 3 spots, and how do you think it's going to all go down?
Well, Golden State already has number 6, no doubt about it, even though they did get lost to Utah tonight. I was disappointed. But you know what? Houston's going to, you made a good point on that. And Houston, I think, maybe could go back down to number 8. I mean, this is looking so far so good. Utah and LA Lakers are finding out right now. But, if the Lakers did make the playoffs, I wouldn't be surprised if they got literally demolished by San Antonio or Utah getting demolished. But I think Utah has a better chance against San Antonio, in my opinion. You guys shake up, I think, if you had to ask the 3 who's going to make it, Golden State's already got it. I think Houston, Utah, and LA are all going to fight for that 7th and 8th spot.
All right, so that's your pick on how the West is going to go out. So now that we've kind of, settled it down here on who's kind of going out there and hopefully going to make the 8 spots in the West, and of course we've all got the East. They're all clinched, but who do you see, of course, in the East? And I want you to tell me about the East and the West. In the East, Miami is obviously the clear favorite. But if you had to pick a team other than Miami in the East to go on to the NBA Finals and represent the East, who would it be? And also, who do you think is going to go represent the West in the NBA Finals?
The let's see, a team that might make it a surprise for me. Yeah, that's a good question. I would probably go with Brooklyn. Really like Brooklyn. I like how they're playing right now. They're only winning one right now, but I think they're going to become better as a team. I like Brooke Lopez right now. I also like Deron Williams, and especially getting one over Charlotte. But of course, they're going to beat Charlotte. It's not a huge surprise to me. I think that's going to be a surprise pick for me. A team that I don't think gets enough credit, and probably a team that's underrated, in my opinion. West, if we go to that right now, I would have to say, I think Golden State, I think they really shocked the world. A team that, picked up some people, Jarrett Jack, Carl Landry, two guys that really came off the bench and really worked hard this season. Steph Curry. I think they're going to probably be the most fun team even against Denver. I think they're going to have a good chance. But, if I had to look at Denver and the LA Clips, if they had to play one of those teams, I think they would have a really good shot at being both of them. But if you look at Oklahoma City, Golden State had a close game against them. San Antonio, they did win one game against them, I believe, this season. And I think Golden State is a shocker right now because I think they're going to look for that. 7 and 8 spots don't look very good to me at all. I think they're just going to get demolished by San Antonio, Oklahoma. Denver against Golden State, that's going to be a good matchup. I think LA and Memphis is going to be looking like a good matchup for me, too.
All right, pretty good stuff. All right, so one last question for you. I know you're a huge Golden State fan, but of course you probably have been hearing about the latest Seattle Sacramento Kings saga going on. How do you think that's going to play out with both cities putting forth these big offers to the NBA to try to get this team? I mean, this team's already been eliminated from the playoffs, but
between the tables and the group for Sacramento that is really trying for them to stay here. And I know you get your vacation system at first, and I think it could work out. They could maybe stay. I know you probably want them to stay, but I don't know if it's going to work out. I think Seattle really does their team, but the same thing they can do. They're actually going to go, in the capital and everything.
All right, pretty.
We're going to play Sacramento, I'm going to say, because I think all the fans love them. You guys want them to stay, and just really wanting them to stay too. So, also the fan group's trying to keep them there.
Well, I see some pretty good stuff in that too. I mean, of course, I'm a Sacramento fan, like you said, and I want the Kings to stay. And both cities have a good offer, so both cities have done their part, and now it's up to the NBA owners to decide which city should get the Kings. Hey, Robert, thanks for calling up and being the first guest on my show. Hope to talk to you again soon.
Thanks, man. That'll be awesome.
All right, that was Robert Dieters from National Sports, this very show that we do, that I do this episode on every week. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be doing the show every week, so I thank him a lot for that. Always some great insight and always a great sportsman. I love talking to him. All right, so he basically broke down the NBA going on right now. So let's get to the things I didn't mention when I was talking about the standings. Miami, of course, like I said, is the big favorite. They've already clinched playoff spot, and in fact, I actually think they've pretty much clinched the Eastern Conference. They've already got home court advantage in the East. Now you have New York, who's in second place currently in the East. They've won 12 straight, which is also a pretty nice winning record. Of course, Miami had one earlier this season that actually just ended not too long ago. So both teams are really going to be, both Miami and New York are probably my two picks to go and represent the East in the NBA Finals. But of course, then you have Indiana, Brooklyn, Chicago, Atlanta, Boston, and Milwaukee that can all do their part. Now, of course, Robert said that Brooklyn could be an underdog, and I've seen them too play. I mean, when I've seen them play against the Kings, they can absolutely destroy them from the field. They're a very good shooting team, They've all got some pretty good players, and Brooklyn's kind of the underdog, and I'll agree with Robert on that. Indiana's also been a huge surprise this season, ranked third in the East currently. They've got some pretty good players, but will they be good enough to represent the East later on? We'll see how far they can go. But I don't think Chicago, Atlanta, Boston, Milwaukee will be able to get to the Eastern Conference. But of course, it's the NBA, and anything can happen. In the West, of course, we have San Antonio, Oklahoma City, Denver, Los Angeles Clippers, and Memphis that have all clinched their ticket to the Western Conference playoffs to get to the NBA Finals. The only 3 slots that remain are the 6th, 7th, and 8th seeds, which currently belong to Golden State, Houston, Utah. But you've got the LA Lakers and Dallas right hot on their tail. Dallas with only, 4 games left to go probably for all these teams pretty much. I don't see Dallas coming up and doing something, considering that they're 2.5 games behind on the Lakers and 3 games behind on Utah. I think Dallas is pretty much out now. Of course, anything can happen. They're still mathematically able to get that 8th and 7th seed or whatnot, but I just don't see it in reality happening. So Dallas should soon be eliminated. And it'll soon just come down to a race between Golden State, Houston, Utah, and the Lakers to fight for the final 3 spots in the West out of the 4 teams that are there. So it should be a very good matchup. I mean, it would be a huge history maker if the LA Lakers did not make the playoffs because, like I said last week, the LA Lakers almost never make the playoffs. I mean, they almost always make the playoffs, and you almost never see them miss the playoffs, and it would be an historic thing if they missed it because you don't see that very often. Utah, Houston, Golden State, of course, like Robert said, their schedules are, the hardness of their schedules could really determine how these final standings are going to turn out. So it'll be interesting to see, and it'll be a great battle between the Los Angeles Lakers and Utah for that 8th seed. And if Golden State and Houston can win the rest of their games, they're pretty much in. So we'll just see how it turns out. But right now, I think, my personal opinion, Golden State will be in. Houston right now looks like it will be in. And whoever's going to get the 8th seed, it's not going to be Dallas. So it's either going to be LA, Lakers, or Utah. Only the final game, only when 82 games have been played by both teams will we realize who's in the 8th spot. So I have a top 7 in the West, but I don't have a top 8. And, of course, the top 8 in the East has already been decided. So that's your NBA breakdown with only a few games left to go. I actually went to the game tonight between the Kings and the Memphis Grizzlies. It was great. I always love seeing the Kings play, and it was a close game. And, seriously, if you've never been to an NBA game, you really need to go. It's a lot of fun. They really get in with the fans, and if your team if you're home and you've got the fans just absolutely screaming and everything, and it's a close game, then it's really a lot of fun, win or lose. The Kings did lose tonight by a score of 2 points, sadly, but it's always a great time. You should get out to a game if you can afford it. So that's your NBA breakdown. As for NASCAR, I'm about 13 and a half minutes through my show, so that's pretty good. Let's move on to NASCAR, by the way. And like I said at the beginning of the show, there was some history that was made during the race today, and that history was made by Jimmy Johnson. He won at Martinsville today, and that's a huge victory because this is the 8th win for Johnson. 8. He's now got 8 wins under his belt at Martinsville. It's incredible what this guy can do at this little tiny track that we consider the paperclip because, well, it looks like a paperclip. It's a tiny half-mile track, not a lot of banking, a lot of bumping, and it's been a place where battles and tempers can really get heated. I remember last year when Jeff Gordon and Jimmy Johnson were leading on the final restart, and Clint Boyer came down and sliced those two and bumped them both up into the wall. It caused a lot of controversy between Jeff Gordon and Clint Boyer. Jeff Gordon was really mad at Clint Boyer, and then ultimately that would lead Jeff Gordon to get revenge on Boyer at Phoenix of last year, and I've talked about that in prior shows, so you know about that. But that's what Martinsville is. It's a bumping and banging thing, and if your car is clean at the end of the day, then it's pretty much a miracle. But it can really do a lot of damage, and there's a lot of cautions that usually spring from it too. So let's go to basically the stats of this game. Jimmy Johnson led 347 of the 500 laps at the race. The official title of the race was the STP Gas Booster 500, by the way. It was the 62nd win of his career, so he's really starting to get those wins on his resume now, and he probably could compete for some of the higher man, I can't forget it. Like the history record books and for number of wins for a driver in the Sprint Cup Series, Jimmie Johnson will be, if he keeps winning like he does during his entire career, he's going to be up there in probably the second or third place like Jeff Gordon is around there. But Jeff Gordon slowed down, but Jimmie Johnson's still going. Anywho, Clint Bowyer, he ran second today, and that's actually pretty good for him considering that early in the race he was part of a caution that took out some of the head guys in the field. It was kind of like a few cars back from first place, and Clint Bowyer got spun around. It caused a few other drivers to get clipped and banged and whatever. It caused some damage. So it was actually a very good thing that he was able to finish second after having such a early start to the race that didn't go very well. Now, he was followed by Jeff Gordon, Casey Kane, and Kyle Busch to round out the top five. Clint Bowyer, by the way, he actually did do very well in practice all week, but a poor qualifying spot caused him to kind of play catch-up kind of during the day, because if you're not at Martinsville, if you're not near the front of the field in the beginning, it's hard to come back and be at the front of the field at the end. It's just the way Martinsville is. You can only pass really down on the inside, and you have to have a really fast car that's kind of perfect. Maybe just a little on the tight side. You don't really want it loose. So Jimmie Johnson, this is the first repeat winner of 2013 in the Cup Series. All the other drivers that have won this year have only won once. Jimmie Johnson, this is his second win of the year, of course. We all remember he won the Daytona 500 at the beginning of the year, just a few weeks back. Also with the win, Johnson also regained the series points lead by 6 points over sixth-place finisher, and also the defending champion from last year, Brad Keselowski. Of course, Dale Earnhardt Jr. was in the points lead at the beginning of the race, but he had a lot of problems during the race, and he didn't finish that great, and he moved down from the points. The race itself was pretty good for Danica Patrick because she finished 12th, and she actually was the top finisher from Stewart-Haas Racing. So she finished the best out of all the cars owned by Stewart-Haas Racing in the race. So that was 12th, and for a lot of NASCAR commentators, they say that's really good for a driver to finish, for her to finish that good at Martinsville in her first try, because Martinsville is one of those really hectic tracks. It's a track that commentators and drivers all say is one of the hardest tracks on the entire circuit. Even though it's a half mile and pretty tiny, it's a really hard track to a lot of drivers. So that's why they said the 12th place finish was actually really good. Probably the biggest crash highlight of the day actually came on lap 487. All right, so we're talking about 13 laps to go in this race, and the race actually got red flagged because of this incident. The incident included Kurt Busch. All right, his number 78 Chevrolet SS. All right, Furniture Row vehicle, the one that Reagan Smith drove when he won at Darlington not too long ago. His car hit turn one really hard, and it actually caught the entire car on fire. All right, and it put on flames and everything else you can think of. All right, so Kurt Busch, he was luckily all right from the accident, but it did cause a red flag that came with only a few laps left to go in the race. But on the restart, Jimmie Johnson was able to get ahead, and he won the race over Clint Bowyer by, I think it was something like 0.6 seconds or something around that. So basically that was probably the biggest one of the day, was Kurt Busch's wreck into turn one, caused the entire car to catch on fire, spew flames, oil, whatever you can think of. As for Dale Earnhardt Jr., there was we were about 40 laps away from this race being over with. A yellow flag soon after lap 459. The yellow flag flew, and then it flew because of a chain reaction between Vickers, Patrick, and Dale Earnhardt Jr., which sent Dale Earnhardt Jr. spinning into turn 4, and that's kind of why he had trouble, just to help you understand why Dale Earnhardt Jr. had such a bad day when he, usually runs well at the track. By the way, Earnhardt did finish 24th, and he did fall from first to third in points. So, like I said earlier, he did fall. He finished badly, but that was the specifics of it. So that basically summarizes the day at Martinsville. 500 lap race, a really long, grueling race, a lot of bumping and running and all that stuff. Jimmy Johnson wins the 62nd race of his career, 8th career win at Martinsville. He led 347 of the 500 laps. The biggest wreck of the day had to have been Kurt Busch. He brought out the red flag, spewing fires and stuff, flames. And then Clint Boyer, he finished second after qualifying bad, even though he did practice well. And it's also kind of a comeback because he was wrecked earlier in the race, in a wreck that involved a few cars and got banging, I guess, of each other. Binging and banging. And then Stewart Haas Racing didn't do too well. The best finisher was Danica Patrick, 12th place. All right, so that was the summarization of today's Martinsville race. And I also forgot Johnson did reclaim the point standings lead in addition to the win. So that's the summary of the race. And so let's move on to the NCAA men's tournament. Oh, actually, I'm going to have a short commercial break before then. So after the commercial break, I'm going to go over the Wichita State versus Louisville game and also the Syracuse or Michigan game and kind of, settle things down and prepare us for the big game tomorrow for the national championship in men's basketball. So I'll see you guys after this short commercial break. And we're back, everybody, from the commercial break. So now I'm going to talk about the NCAA men's basketball tournament. Now, of course, as we know, this entire tournament's been really crazy, all right? There's been a lot of, shockers, a lot of upsets, a lot of Cinderellas this year. I mean, the bracket for this year was really, screwed up. I think every single person that put in a bracket, everywhere you could put a bracket, has probably failed because I don't think anybody could have predicted this. I mean, the odds of anybody predicting this one right, the odds of making a perfect bracket when you don't even know the sport of basketball is like a huge, gigantic number. I mean, it's so huge that I can't even remember what it is. But you try to pick one out for this NCAA March Madness and not knowing that was going to happen, then I think the odds would probably be, probably 1,000, 1,000,000 times, even harder, more unlikely that you wouldn't get it right because we've had Cinderellas like Florida Gulf Coast University, but they only made it to the Sweet 16. Of course, they were the first 15th seed to ever make it that far, but they did lose to Florida in the Sweet 16. But there was also another Cinderella this year that I don't think anybody, thought that they were going to get to the Final Four in Atlanta, and that would be Wichita State. All right, the name really suits them. All right, the Wichita State Shockers is the actual name of Wichita State's mascot. So they had to take on Louisville the other night. Of course, Wichita State had already done some pretty bad upsets. Of course, well, not bad upsets, but they already performed a bunch of upsets against very good teams that a lot of people thought at the beginning of the year they were just going to roll, or the beginning of the NCAA tournament that they were just going to roll over. But that's not the case. Wichita State surprised everybody. They made it to the Final Four, and they really did give Louisville a run for their money. But Louisville was able to come back. Louisville did win 72-68, but they did not. But like I said, they did not win it easily. Wichita State, of course, let's give it a little bit of background on Wichita State, what they did to get to this Final Four point. They had to knock out some huge seeds. Wichita State, the Wichita State Shockers were 9th ranked in their division when this all started up. They had to beat number 1 seed Gonzaga, number 2 seed Ohio State on its way to the Final Four. And this is the first Final Four for Wichita State since 1965. So it's been forever since they've been to the Final Four. So this was a huge thing for the school. And to even cap it off, the Shockers had a 12-point lead on number 1 ranked, pretty much in the tourney, Louisville, with 13:35 to play. The Shockers were about to seriously shock everybody once again. But Louisville, they had this tremendous comeback that in the final 13:35, of course, when you're talking about basketball, 12 points in 13:35 minutes 13 minutes and 35 seconds don't sound like that much. But when you're in college basketball, it's a huge game changer when they do that. All right, it's really a big thing. And then so basically the Cardinals were able to erase the entire 12-point deficit in the final 13 minutes, and they eventually outscored Wichita State by 16 points in that same time period. Therefore, they won by 4 by the score of 72 to 68. As for the advantages that Louisville had over Wichita State in the final 13 minutes of the game, Louisville kind of turned the tide a little bit. In the first half, it was all Wichita State. Wichita State scored first. They scored 8 points, the first 8 points of the entire game. It was 8-0 in favor of Wichita State. Wichita State had a 12-point lead. It looks like they were doing really, really good. But once you got down to 13 minutes in Louisville, I guess Louisville kind of started getting desperate, and they started to realize that they could possibly lose to this team and be yet another upset that Wichita State, basically beat. They would become the next upset of Wichita State's Cinderella run. There we go. But so I guess Louisville just turned on the Jets, because in the final 13 minutes of the game, Louisville scored 37 points as compared to Wichita State's 21. All right, their field goals went from Louisville had 11 out of 19 on the field goals in the final 13 minutes as compared to 7-17 of Wichita State. So not only did they make more than Wichita State, but they also shot more as well. And then here's was a very crucial part in terms of how the final 13 minutes of Saturday's game turned out. Wichita State, in the final 13 minutes of the game against Louisville, they had 7 turnovers. All right, when you're in a very big game like this and you make 7 turnovers in 13 minutes, it's not that great. But it can be great, of course, if the other team's turning it over. Well, Louisville was not doing that. Instead of Wichita State 7, Louisville only made 1. One measly turnover in the final 13 minutes did Louisville make. Wichita State made 7 in that same time period. Huge difference. 6 turnover difference, which could be big. And Louisville, basically, on average of points per possession, that stat, Louisville nearly doubled that of Wichita State. Louisville 1.54 average points per possession in the final 13 minutes of the game, while Wichita State only had just below 0.9 points per possession in the final 13 minutes of the game. So Louisville seriously turned on the Jets, and they had every advantage over Wichita State in those final minutes. But man, it must have been something, because Wichita State was about to pull another upset. They were leading by a good margin, and they just couldn't pull it off. And it hurt them down the stretch how Louisville was able to get their run, and it became successful for Louisville. As for the game leaders on both sides, Wichita State. C. Early, he got 24 points. Louisville was led by R. Smith, who scored 21. In terms of the rebounds, C. Early also led again. He got 10 rebounds. C. Behannon, I think it is. C. Behannon, he led Louisville in rebounds with 9. In terms of the assists, Wichita had a lot of assists going on, but they were definitely being racked up with M. Armstead, who not only led assists, but he also led steals. He racked up 7 and 2 in both of those categories, respectively. R. Smith also had a huge game for Louisville in both of those categories. He was the leading assister for Louisville with only 3 assists, but he also did have 2 steals. And then in terms of blocks, C. Early again topping everybody with 1 block, and then Louisville had 2 blocks from their G. Dieng. So that kind of spaces out. I mean, very, very even, but most of those stats really were that our huge story came in Louisville's 13-minute run to advance to the NCAA title game. And I mean, if Wichita State would have gone on and been a huge Cinderella, but I think it's great for the school. It's great for Wichita State that they got that far, and it's really great to see, how much action and stuff happened with these two teams. So Louisville, they advanced to the Final Four, and they hope to win it. It's definitely been a few years since Louisville has last won the title, so they'll try to restart good. They'll try to restart their history again. In fact, their last national championship game that they played was in 1986, and that's the year. That's also the last year that they won the entire thing. So I was talking about that for a very long time. So let's get over to Syracuse and Michigan, both fourth-ranked seeds in their divisions, and so they came together to face each other to see who would take on what now would be Louisville. Very even game between the two. Not really much give and take going on between the two, because in all honesty, Syracuse didn't gain a very large lead. Their largest lead for Syracuse was 5 points. Michigan did have a largest lead of 11, but in all honesty, the game was really close the whole time. The points really the Syracuse really had the points really going for them with Seafair. He racked in 22 points. For Michigan, Hardaway Jr. led the way. He got 13 points. Rebounds, McGarry got a double with that. He got 12. Jay Grant on Syracuse, he got 7 rebounds. Assists wise, B. Trich of Syracuse got 8. M. McGarry again topped everybody on his team. This time he had 6 assists. Trey Burke, the guy I was talking about a lot last time, he led Michigan in the steals with 3. M. Carter Williams on Syracuse led his team in steals with 2. And then blocks, our Christmas had 1 on Syracuse, and M. McGarry again led his team, this time with 2 blocks. So that's kind of how it all went down. But a huge difference in the game, I think, would have to be fouls. Syracuse got 19 fouls, Michigan 11. And the fouls hurt Syracuse down the stretch as well, and that kind of what I think that's kind of what lost it for Syracuse was the late fouls that they called. And also with Syracuse, with their turnovers, the turnovers for Syracuse, they couldn't answer Michigan's 11. Now, of course, they had 19 by themselves, but you could do better without those pesky little turnovers. So, like for example, you could give out the ball over a lot, and you could still win a game because you play well on defense and you make them not score off those turnovers. But if you don't do a very good job at keeping them from scoring off those turnovers, then the turnovers are, a very big stat to look at. But your turnovers should never be big at any time. It's just not, you don't want to see that stat really high. Syracuse, they only scored 10 points off of 10 Michigan turnovers in the final four. No, wait. That number contradicts with no. 10 Michigan turnovers in the Final Four. That's weird. Both, one thing says 11, one thing says 10. That's a mistake by ESPN. But definitely not very good numbers for Syracuse down the stretch. I mean, they didn't have a very good game at all. I mean, just seriously, any stat you go to is one of the lowest stats that you can think of, and Syracuse had the lowest numbers in the tourney against Michigan. It wasn't even funny. So basically, late fouls allow Michigan to go ahead. Syracuse battling it out, and Syracuse paid the price at the end for the fouls and all their turnovers and their inability to score on Michigan's turnovers. That basically sums up the Syracuse-Michigan game, and now Michigan will take on Louisville tomorrow. It should be a great game. My pick personally has to be Louisville because they're going to be playing with a lot of passion for that Kevin Ware guy. But Michigan, if that Trey Burke guy gets hot, and I say that again, if Trey Burke gets hot, then you better watch out for Michigan. It'll be a great game tomorrow. Can't wait to see what happens. So that does it for this edition of the NBA and NASCAR Power Half Hour. I'm James McDaniels. I'll see you guys next week for another edition of the NBA and NASCAR Power Half Hour, and of course we'll have a review of the NASCAR race. They're going to be at Texas next Saturday night. It's going to be great racetrack. Love Texas. It's very big, very wide. It's almost like an Atlanta, kind of course. So a lot of fun. We should see a lot of interesting things happen at Texas, like we always do. Everything goes down in Texas and stuff. And then of course we'll have the results of March Madness this week. We'll set the NBA stuff up for you for the NBA playoffs and whatever other weird news in either of these two sports. I'll also of course bring to you. Oh, by the way, I also forgot to mention my NASCAR thing that Mark Maron also did. He salvaged a 10th place spot driving Denny Hamlin's car while Denny Hamlin is going to be out for the next few weeks with the back injury. So that was pretty good considering that Mark Maron kind of got beat around all day. But good finish for him and the number 11 team and whatnot. So he probably made Denny pretty happy. So with that, I'm signing off, and until next Sunday, I hope you guys have the rest of the week. A happy rest of the week, excuse me. All right, see y'all later.